On behalf of the Center for Religion and its Context, I would like to welcome you all today to our first Brown Bag Lunch conversation of the year, featuring alumna Reverend Lori Kyle, Black activist and seminarian Stachelle Bussey, and Emmanuel College's principal Michelle Voss-Roberts. Today they will be discussing First Unitarian Church of Louisville's recent provision of sanctuary to Black Lives Matter activists. Briefly about the center, through academic and continuing education events, Emmanuel College's Center for Religion and its Context shares its distinctive contextual approach to the study of religion in all aspects: theology and belief, historical development, lived experience, and diversity of expressions in the United Church of Canada and in other Christian contexts, as well as in Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, and other religious understandings. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. As we assemble in separate spaces, we recognize that for thousands of years, the land on which we find ourselves has been a sacred gathering place for many peoples of Turtle Island. We respectfully recognize that wherever we are, especially in the Americas, we are on traditional territories of Indigenous nations who continue to cry out for justice. May each of us who gather this day commit to listen, to learn, and to work to right the wrongs of the past. And now I would like to hand it over to Principal Michelle Voss-Roberts.
Thank you, Sean. This is an event of the Center for Religion and its Context, and thank you very much, Sean, for facilitating this. One immensely important context for religious leadership right now is the widespread reckoning with the deep reach of white supremacy and anti-Black racism into all of our institutions. Just a couple of weeks ago, the United Church of Canada passed a landmark declaration that it would become an anti-racist church, at the same time as it appointed Michael Blair as its first Black General Secretary, and Emmanuel College alumna Adele Holliday as its very first anti-racism and equity officer. As Maya Douglas reminded our alumni group this morning, the work is just beginning. As one of the theological schools of the United Church of Canada, we are part of this effort as well. And today we're welcoming back one of our alumni from the class of 2014, the Reverend Lori Kyle. Lori worked for years in clinical social work before receiving the call to enter ministry. In 2014, she did graduate from Emmanuel College with her Master of Divinity degree, and she was ordained in 2015. Her experience includes congregational ministry in the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Durham for 2 years, prior to transitioning to community ministry, where she employed and trained Canadian newcomers through New Horizons house painting business. Since 2019, Reverend Lori has been the settled minister at the First Unitarian Church of Louisville. She is joined by Stachelle Bussey, who is a Louisville native, a recent graduate of Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and a current member of the Vanderbilt University Divinity School Public Theology and Racial Justice Collaborative Cohort. That's a national body of persons committed to consistent dialogue around issues pertaining to racial justice. Since 2015, Stachelle has been worship director for One Church Louisville, where she leads worship, arranging music and overseeing programming and sound. She's also the founder of the Hope Bus, a not-for-profit that bridges the gap between local organizations and the community with projects like grocery store runs, health fairs, community conversations on mental health conferences, free farmers markets, and school supplies giveaways. As part of the local Black Lives Matter movement in Louisville, she has been fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor. So today, we will have some time to hear an update from them on the ground in Louisville, and also recognizing that the U.S. is in the middle of still an undecided election, and so this is an intense time, and so I'm very grateful that both of you have taken some time to join us. So we'll hear from you, and then we'll have some time for discussion, and I can moderate the Q&A if you have questions and would like to enter them into the chat. box. So welcome, Lori and Stachelle. Maybe we could just get started by asking, how did the two of you meet one another?
So hey guys, thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor and a pleasure. It's also such an honor and a pleasure to know my good friend now, Reverend Lori Kyle. Really, one of those crazy nights. It kind of just all came together. One of my seminary friends and graduates, Lynette Lau, operates a ministry out of First Unitarian, and so I was no stranger to Pastor Lori's name, but we kind of just came together when we needed sanctuary, and so that's kind of how we met, and our conversation started, and just her and tons of other clergy members, we all just came together, and we're still coming together. We're still organizing, being able to help each other. But really, that's how we met. It was a crisis, but from that crisis, God created beautiful community, and I'm glad now we can call each other friends and co-conspirators.
Absolutely.
I do love that word, co-conspirators, right? You're plotting and also breathing together, right? Sharing that breath. It takes on kind of new meaning in the time of COVID, doesn't it? So Breonna Taylor is a household name now, even in Toronto. I'm wondering if you can outline for us how the activist community mobilized after she was shot and killed by Louisville police officers during a raid on her apartment in March, and also then during and after the grand jury. What did that organization on the ground look like?
I can jump in to begin to say that from a media perspective, it was mostly quiet. Breonna was killed in March, and it wasn't until after George Floyd's murder in late May that we started hearing more about Breonna's situation. And at that time, different organizations here, Black Lives Matter, Kentucky Alliance, created sort of an epicenter for the protesters down at what used to be Jefferson Square, which is the heart of downtown Louisville. The courthouse is there, the police headquarters, City Hall, and there's a courtyard kind of area there. So protesters claimed that space for their own and renamed it Breonna Square. It has since been renamed Injustice Square, given how things have unfolded. So at that time and since then, there has been a daily presence down at the square, and many, many protests that have originated from there and have been in the community. Certainly when the grand jury, or when the Attorney General's office on September 23rd made the announcement about the charges or lack thereof that would be coming to the officers that murdered Breonna Taylor, things certainly picked up then. There had been many, many protests prior to then, but efforts intensified, energies intensified. Curfew was brought forth by the mayor, and that's when sanctuary happened. We can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's how things kind of came to pass chronologically. Stachelle, what else would you add to that?
Well, my experience is a tad bit different. So May 28th is kind of when everything when we start getting news and everything like hit the fan, and we just straight took it to the streets. Like it was just, somebody was like, meet us at 6th and Jefferson, and we hit the streets. Really, it was people who knew nothing about organizing. Us, none of us did, actually. I could think of a couple leaders who were just mad. Black leaders and the Black community. We just kind of came down to Jefferson Square. Like, we wanted answers. We demanded answers. Why this girl had been murdered in her home. And so one of the very first leaders that we had was a Black guy who was not versed in mobilization, who was not versed in movement. He was just like, we just met. We just came down to and occupied this place. And that was May 28th. I specifically remember us standing in front of a mega bus for hours that couldn't get through. Uh, and that's what we did. We stood there. There were other organizations present who came down, who were actually like the Black Lives Matter. They were already, of course, mobilized, doing some other stuff, of course, around, the nation and stuff. But as far as the Black Lives Matter chapter in Louisville, they came as support for that day. But really, May 28th was just a bunch of people from the Black community. Like, we didn't have enough. We want answers. And so from that, from May 28th to probably June the 5th, which was Breonna's birthday, June the 5th was Breonna's birthday, I experienced something that I never thought I would experience in my life. But we had some people on the ground who were in Ferguson, my partner was in Ferguson, who had already been a part. So we kind of had people guiding us, but like we were, for the most part, like clueless. So we had no clue about pepper bullets. We had no clue about chemical. We didn't know anything. We were just like, what is going on? But it happened. So that was like the very first week was so intense. And we kept showing up. And the Kentucky Alliance got there, I think. We started on Thursday. The Kentucky Alliance started occupying the square on that Sunday. And that's just kind of how it all got started and still growing with the Kentucky Alliance, with the Bell Project, Shamika Parrish Wright and her crew coming down there, who all had probably been, which is Kentucky Alliance has a tough history in activism and movement with Ann Bray and Carl Braden. And they all just kind of like came and we occupied it. And that's what it was. The decision day was kind of when I think Sanctuary got involved in it. And that's kind of when we all learned about Sanctuary. We all started looking up laws, like, okay, what does it mean? What can we be safe from? What can we do this? And so to me, like that's how the community came together. 90% or 95% of the people who have been out there have no organizing experience, zero understanding of mobilization, zero understanding of just know like that they are tired. And so that's kind of my experience. And, I like to say, Pastor Lori knows what I like to say. It's like, okay, like this is church. And since then, like it's been a microcosm of just incredible. It's been an incredible place, which has come a resource place. And that place particularly is so important because it used to be an auction block where slaves were sold from all over Kentucky. So, and for many of us who are Black, six in Jefferson is doomsday, right? That's where they are locking up our uncles and our dads and our aunties, and we don't go down there. That was a forbidden space, but we've done something different now, and so that's that's what I feel like mobilization has looked like since May 28th.
Amazing.
And just to be clear, 6th and Jefferson is the intersection, one of the corners of Jefferson, Breonna, Injustice Square.
Okay. So moving then towards what happened on September 23rd with there was an announcement from the Attorney General, and then a series of events unfolded towards Sanctuary. So can you walk us through both what happened on September 23, 24, and then also how did First Unitarian Church reach the decision to give sanctuary to protesters, and what was involved in organizing that effort?
So I can tell you the story up until, and I'm gonna let Pastor Lori take it over. For 7 minutes, it was shock. Okay, like it was like 7 minutes and 20. Like we're like, is that it? And so I for sure was like, we need to march, and we mobilized tons of people. We need to march.
This was the announcement about the charges, right?
Yeah. So we were shocked, like for a long time, nobody said anything. And then immediately emotion broke out everywhere. People were mad, people were yelling. It was just, we were like, is that it? Like we thought the connection had dropped. And we was like, we need to march. So we marched. And I mean, we marched for like 2.5 hours, 3 hours. We marched and then got met with heavy police force, heavy police force, which people were arrested, people were hurt, people were put in a hospital because of the way the police handled them. And somehow we all ended up back in Injustice Square at 6th and Jefferson. And then people began to talk about what we could do. And then I'll let Pastor Lori take it from there.
So yeah, the community had been waiting for 6 months for this. She had been murdered in March. It's now late September, September 23rd specifically. So this was long awaited, a lot of energy, a lot of anticipation. I remember being down at Injustice Square and being stunned, not entirely surprised because it took so long. There was just a sense of this isn't going to be good. It was worse than expected, I think, generally, as Stachelle mentioned. Many of us just had energy and grief, and there was just a lot of protesting and marching that many of us participated in. So then that night, the night of September 23rd, Wednesday, the mayor had issued a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. for 3 days. And I was at home and I got a call from a congregant, Lisa Wilner, who is a Kentucky state representative, who said, we're down here at the square, the police, it's at like 7 p.m., pre-curfew. The police are already moving us out and starting to talk about making arrests. Our church has an open air outside courtyard. Do you suppose we can open it up? Just give people a place to go. Of course. So we did that, put up quickly a PA system, notified a few folks, and then just energy and word spreads as it does. People came, speeches were made, there was a little bit of food that we happened to have, and there was a little bit of organizing prior to that, not for sanctuary certainly, but medics who had already been operating out of our church, giving a mobile medic van ministry, had already been on the ready. The jail support folks were already ready to go. But as far as sanctuary per se, the word hadn't even been mentioned, the concept hadn't even been considered. It just organically happened that night. The following morning, I met with our church's board of trustees to say, we need to concretely consider, are we doing this? Is this a thing? And unanimously, we all decided that we are definitely in, there's a need, and we were going to step into it. So then things got thrown into overdrive with organizing and sign-up sheets and what kind of volunteers were needed and food and security. And it took on a life of its own, and certainly not only First Unitarian folks, but other clergy, other people in the community who were interested. And as the nights unfolded, there were 5 nights altogether. Initially, the curfew was 3 nights. It got extended to 5 nights. And so it just became a machine. And, the word spread and people just knew that that's where sanctuary was. So that was the beginning on September 23rd. The very next night, on the 24th, there was a ton of energy in our neighborhood. Reportedly, there was a small fire that was set around the public library, which is right across the street from us. And in the name of dealing with a flare that had been thrown through a library window, dozens of riot-geared police officers came to our property and surrounded it. Another state legislator, Attica Scott, and the Kentucky Alliance, which is an activist, a very strong activist group here locally, their leader, Shamika Parrish Wright, were arrested for no known reason whatsoever. Lots of energy, lots of people. Perhaps you've seen images of lines of the police faced off with the protesters on our church property. There's a residential building right across the street from us. People there, were throwing things, golf balls and batteries from their balconies. There was just a lot of energy on that night. Pepper spray is hard to breathe for a while. Thankfully, nothing erupted. There wasn't an invasion from law enforcement onto the church property, but a lot of energy, a lot of heat that night. So to answer your question, Michelle, those were the things that unfolded on the 23rd and the 24th.
Wow. And when you were at Emmanuel College, I wonder if you had any clue that this would be your ministry.
No, not at all. When I took this job, I had no idea. As I mentioned earlier, on September 22nd, if someone would have said, there will be tens of thousands of people across the land who would despise what your church will be doing. There will be dozens of riot-geared police officers surrounding your building in a face-off with a couple of hundred people you invited to your church. All these things will be happening. I said, no way. What are you, no way. But as Providence would have it, these things unfolded, and we, certainly the congregation here, but beyond that, the faith community, people who are interested in justice, stepped up in a big way to meet this need. People's voices deserve to be heard. Justice needs to be fought for, and the quieting of those voices through a curfew seemed like just supporting continued injustice. And so we stepped into our values to say, not here and not now.
Amen. Now, Black Lives Matter was started by women of color, and there are high-profile figures in the movement, but it's also a movement that's well known for having a more diffuse model of leadership than, say, the civil rights movement of the 60s. So can you describe how the leadership works in your community?
This particular is one of the things that I was describing earlier was the fact that people just came together. Like it was my voter sticker. But people just came together and were like, we are tired. Like we've just had enough. Breonna Taylor's name, of course, is a household name, but there have been the Michael Newbys. There have been so many other young Black people who have died at the hands of the police. And so when you talk about civil rights movement, like you can say, hey, Dr. King, or these people. But one thing that I think at the core of this movement is Black women leadership. Okay. And what the Black women have done here, and I can just speak for, Louisville, because look, I just got into this work like 160 days ago. But what I can do is speak to like the Shamika Parish Rights. And then she works with a group of women who are, it's like 5 or 6 of them, who were like decentralized leadership. They literally said, okay, you guys are the leaders. You do this. Like, if you guys want to march, you do. And even though they like kind of oversee, they gave us the power. And so that's what I think is like different than this movement. Like, and I think it confused government too. Like, okay, if we attack this group, then it's another group that shows up. Okay, if it's this group, then we don't. So we kind of took that ideal of decentralized leadership and said, okay, your leader. Out of this movement, there have been other organizations created that have people been like, I found my purpose. I can do this. I can do that. Like Kentucky Alliance, of course, is at the core of it with Shamika Parish, right? And her board and Tyra and Nicole and all of them. But they were like, we've done this before. Okay, like here's y'all chance to just move forward. Like even me, like no, you lead them. Like no, what is the next move? They're looking to you as leadership. And so I think that whole ideal of decentralizing leadership has just empowered people to like become, to be. People will leave this movement like, guess what? I started my own organization, like the Black Women's Collective, who are full of 20-something-year-old women, and it's like 3 of them who started it maybe like 2 months ago. Then you got BDT Strong. They're working on some policy right now, how to police their own community in the California neighborhood. So like all of these, that decentralizing of leadership has created like purpose and an opportunity for other leaders to come and step up. And it's not like you do this and you do this and you do this. Shamika and Nicole and all of them are really big on yielding the floor. Like, okay, I'm not good at this. The next person is. Okay, well, this is Atticus. Well, this is this. Well, this is this. And that's what I think it is. You can't pinpoint a leader, but that has been our strength. Decentralized leadership is what is what Black women who are leading this movement have said, right? And then that just trickles down. Okay, next, then you next, then you next. And even, shameless plug, but even with the Hope Bus, like you got to have conversations with different leaders and different people who are coming up, because we won't get to do this work forever, but you empower them. And that's what I think is not necessarily different from the civil rights movement, because those are the boomers. And we have conversations with the boomers, with our Black boomers and our uncles and our family, like, what were you guys doing? And some of them will admit, like we've heard from our aunties and uncles who were teenagers in the 60s, like, yeah, we just kind of settled for this. We were okay with it. But this decentralized leadership has empowered so many other people to do this work. And you can't pinpoint leader. You can lock up Shamika and Attica, and then you got to worry about 5 other leaders that you never even had a clue was a leader. And so that's what I think. That's the way I think it's been working, right? Everybody has their role. If everybody has their purpose, and what can each organization do to literally make sure that we sustain this movement and keep the work going forward and after this.
Stachelle, that is so inspiring.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Lori. Yeah.
Just to add to what Stachelle said, her response, of course, is from the perspective of the Black community, the decentralization. As white allies, it's been very important for us, and our congregation here is primarily white, that we take the lead of the Black leaders. We've been very, very diligent about that, and it's an important aspect of disarming white supremacy and stepping fully into our allyship. So many interviews such as this one has happened in the last number of weeks. And we always try and say that we're privileged to have the opportunity to speak, and that the voices that are most important to be heard are those from the Black community. And that's why I'm thrilled and honored to be on the stage here with my friend Stachelle today.
Yes, and they have done such a wonderful job. I mean, even when they were making, Pastor Lori and First Unitarian were making decisions about their church, but they always text me like, okay, what is it that you guys need? This is what we can do, or how do we need to do this? And this might be beyond our match, but what is it that we need to do? Consistently asking Black leadership, even though this might be pushing us a little bit, how do we best help you? They were consistent in yielding the floor and always making sure that our voices were lifted. So,
That's inspiring, and I think that's important. I think for this audience to hear as well, the importance of consent and not assuming that anyone knows what's needed, but to ask the people most directly involved, and to seek out the leadership that's already on the ground connected to the needs. I also want to ask you about the role of religious communities in community organizing in Louisville. I think this may be one of the ways that the Canadian context that differs from some of the US context around a particular role for religious communities in things like civil rights and anti-racist work.
Well, I can jump in right now to say that it's been a wonderful experience to be exposed to more faith leaders and faith communities through these justice efforts, as evidenced by Stachelle and myself becoming friends. There have been, like I personally am involved in numerous clergy groups and chats, and through those efforts, protest, galvanization, hey, we need clergy in this situation, organizing, coordinating. For example, there was a sign up opportunity to have continuous clergy presence down at Injustice Square. So in all of these ways, protests and speeches and prayer gatherings that have happened in Louisville have been abundant and interfaith. And it's been inspiring to see there's so much, not only political, as we know, but also religious siloing these days as just part of the divisive energy in our world, and certainly in our continent, certainly in this country these days. So it's been inspiring to see that this push for justice, racial justice, has gone beyond those religious barriers, and it's just been a community, certainly with the faith community being a part of the heart of that in our efforts to bring justice to Breonna and to the Black community.
And so truthfully, I must admit that I grew up in a Black church, and that's not saying the Black church is a monolith, but I grew up in a predominantly Black church, in a predominantly Black community. And justice is like, I realized that we just didn't talk about it. We don't have justice ministries. We don't have, because we're like, I think I just discovered that, like, when this all started, we don't have these ministries because we live it. Like, we don't need a justice ministry because we're the ones who need justice. So I've been a part of a church who attempts to be multicultural or diverse, has just opened my eyes to so many things. And of course, going to seminary, I had a rude awakening in 2019. Okay, like a rude awakening, because I was just like, social justice, that's not really my thing. I don't have those conversations. Although my preference was to be in law school, okay, seminary was not on the, but I just got woke up, really, and I took a class that was called prophetic preaching. And in prophetic preaching, we did all this research about the top 25 issues of the Black community, and we didn't even get to preach. And so in my mind, I was like, what was that for? But really, it just set me on fire. Like, oh, these are the things that we need to be preaching about in the Black community. And so that's how I ended up being a part of Vanderbilt and all these spaces. But really, you know, and this is not to say that my Christian belief is over the next person's, but really what I do it because that's literally my Christian conviction, to be in the streets where the people are. And I never knew that in 2019, this would be prepping me, that I was in class and I was in all of these things because it was prepping me for what would come. And I've come alive in this, really, because it was an opportunity. I used to think I was crazy because I was like, why are we not talking about these issues in our churches? Because these are affecting our people. And the most powerful person in the Black community is the Black pastor. More than the president, more than anybody, what the Black pastor says is what goes, even if people don't actually go to the church. And so it's my Christian conviction. There was no other place for me to be other than to be where those people were. I believe if Jesus were here, Jesus would have took a few pepper bullets to the head. I believe if he was here, he would be in the streets where everybody else is. But also acknowledging that it's just not about, you know, Pastor Lori knows, that's my favorite speech. It ain't just about Christians. It's gonna take some Jews and some Buddhists and some people and some atheists and some Unitarians and some Lutherans. It's gonna take all of us to really get this work done, because it's a fight for humanity. And I hope, even if you're not a Christian, that we all believe that we are in a fight for our lives, especially Black lives. And so there's no other way. I mean, our churches are closed anyway. People can't even come in the doors because of coronavirus. What other way should we be doing ministry besides lifting up the very people who have been at the heart of oppression, who have been marginalized, who have just been on the outskirts of society, who have been oppressed at every level, education, right? Healthcare, food insecurity. We don't even have grocery stores in our neighborhood. So, but that's just my, but that's what faith community, like communities, and we have been able to say these things and get people woke up to this. You can't have church, but you can't have a food pantry. You can't, people can't come and have service by the thousands, but you can figure out how to, get some resources to your people. And so, that's what we all should be doing. That's what faith should be, whether it's Christian, whether it's anything else. That's what we should be doing. We should be caring for humanity.
Yeah, that's so powerful to hear you talk about your formation in the Black church, but then also the kind of formation that you were having in your theological education, that you kind of didn't know how it was all going to come together for you, but it did. And a lot of the times doing in the work of theological education, it's hard to see where it's all leading. And we go with the confidence that through learning about our histories and our theologies and ethics and our scriptures and these powerful narratives, that we're going to be formed to be the kind of leaders who can step up when it's necessary, as you are. Now, Lori, how would you talk about this? So I noticed that you recently wrote about this work of providing sanctuary and your experiences in it as basically in terms of worship. So how does the work of sanctuary and this activist work relate to the mission of your church?
Well, it's evident by it's in our Unitarian Universalist DNA. I don't think that it would have so organically happened in this congregation had it not been a fundamental part of our theology. In addition to one's own personal spiritual path, is a consideration for the other. It's a living faith. An informal mantra that you say is deeds, not creeds. We're not as invested in a doctrinal approach so much as living the faith, and in this case, living out our values and our principles include recognizing every person's inherent worth and dignity, and working for justice and equity and compassion. I'm not going to do a laundry list of our principles, but it's just interwoven into our faith base to be doing this work. And it's interesting, Michelle. Numerous questions have come. So this is a religious institution, and you're providing sanctuary. So, what's the worshipful aspect at night during this curfew thing? Well, the answer would be that bread has been broken together, sacred meals have been shared, inspiring messages have been delivered by speakers and received, song and dance have been shared, and all these are aspects of worship, regardless of the faith tradition. And I hearken Rabbi Heschel's response back in the Selma days when somebody else asked him, so have you had any time to pray? And his response was, my marching feet have been praying all the while. So even before protesters get here, there's a sacred, worshipful presence, interconnected presence from human to human that's happening in Louisville and wherever there are protests for justice. And to bring it back full circle, this is just very much in step with our Unitarian values and love and work for justice.
You won't even tell them that I got my first stall when the church was surrounded by.
That's right. That's right. Right here, Stachelle was knighted religiously.
Yes.
Beautiful. So those are the questions that I had prepared for today, and we have still around 15 minutes if people who are participating in this meeting have questions for Lori or Stachelle, or maybe as those questions are coming in, if you have anything you'd like to ask of each other, or anything else that you had been hoping to share with us.
Got one. Oh, sorry, Stacey.
Nope. Go ahead, Pastor Lori. Nope, you got it.
All right. I'll go fast. Just as far as I know that I'm surrounded in our congregation primarily with white people, and I'm guessing that perhaps a lot of the people on this call today are white as well. And so the question of how important is white allyship in this movement is an important one, and I think the answer is that it is critical, absolutely critical. A large part of the power, political power that bring change and move things, rest in the hands of white people, for better or worse, and it is imperative that we remain active, to not level out and kind of go away because the election is over and George Floyd and Breonna's murders are months and months away. This is a long fight, and it is absolutely critical that white allies step into it. Anyway, I'm ready for questions, but Stachelle, you had something.
No, I was just going to say that one thing that I've learned, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, being at this church that I'm at with a white pastor, and we have, and Pastor Lori knows part of the story. It's been a little hectic, but white people have access to resources that Black people have never heard of before. And so one of the things that I think people have to do, especially have conversations, right, with some people. Align yourself with organizations who are doing the work, and you don't have to worry about, you can ask those people questions like, hey, I don't understand this. So, send your students or whatever you can. Send those people to intern at places, at particular organizations, into particular communities where people are living oppressed, people are living. Send your interns to marginalized communities, and that's one of the things I challenge seminary to do. Prepare people to pastor, right, in marginalized communities. Prepare people to pastor and be ready to serve people. And even if you end up pastoring at a church that's 20 miles out, teach people how to work with marginalized communities, because there is only so much that people can do, right? Pastor Lori in the First Unitarian Church have this beautiful building, and they're able to have all these people in it because they have all those sections. There are Black churches who are trying to figure out if they can keep the doors open, and it's we got to learn how to partner with each other. That's and this is probably another shameless plug, but that's one of the reasons I created the Hope Bus, because we were not having enough conversations. We need to share our resources. We need to be together in this, right? Some churches may cook well. Other churches may give coats and do a coat. We have got to learn how to partner together and really give our resources where they're needed, right? And some of that is on white people to have conversations about credit with Black people, because we never had to, because a lot of times those conversations were never brought up. It's just about having, and really the most important thing you can do is have conversations. And after you have conversations, stand in solidarity with those people who you saying lives matter. Okay, I'm done. That's my fuss. But I'm just saying, there are things that white people can do to align themselves with other Black people, right? There are things that white people can get involved in. I'm not going to be the one to tell you to read a book. Don't read one more book. Take that theory and make it practical. Who can you align yourself with? I'm here. I think it's 35 of us on the call. But hey, call me anytime. And I'm in the Black community. Pastor Lori knows. I talk to them. And they talk to me, right? And so it's let's have conversations about what it looks like to really stand in solidarity and not just put a Black Lives Matter flag in our windows.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful. And, you know, that some of the community organizing work that can be done ahead of time is the sort of relational meeting, right? Because everyone has something they can contribute, and everyone may be connected to a resource or a skill that maybe isn't needed at this exact moment. But if you meet with one another and you say, what are you bringing? What do you have to contribute? Then you have a network that you can build on. There's a question from Ian. He asks, how have you found the courage to do what you do?
Who's that for? Is that for Pastor Lori?
Both of you.
You go, Stachelle. I'll come after you.
So really, where I reside, where I am from, I am from the Western Louisville. And that's a population of people where over 70% of them are living at the poverty level or right below it. I teach in the schools that are in the West End, and I see that our kids don't get resources. I'm in neighborhoods. I got to drive 20 minutes to get to a grocery store, like one that I can actually buy from. I am tired most days. Pastor Lori, they always ask me if I sleep. I am tired most days. But when you are fighting for something bigger than you, that's where your courage comes from. When you look those people in the eye and you look at your family members who are still living on, and my family members, over 60% of my family members are still living on some kind of government assistance because they cannot figure out how to crawl their way or get themselves out of that welfare. So the minute that you make $1 over something, they just snatch all the resources from under you. And so it's like when you think about those things, you think about this one thing, that it is so much bigger than me. And one of the things that I like to say, and Pastor Lori knows, is like I love to give that benediction. May the Lord bless you and keep you, but not just like for right now, but for 1,000 generations, for your children and their children and their children and their children, right? Because that's when we begin to see something miraculous happen. And that's where I found my courage from, that I may never get to see everything that I'm working for. But then I look at my sister who is Gen Z, and then I look at my cousins who are under her, and then I look at, that's my motivation. I look at my mom who's 51 years old and works 4 jobs. 4. Because the system is not set up for her to just be able to have one job and sustain. I think about my mom who was making $9 an hour when a program helped her when the church was running a program, and they helped her gave her $18,000 if she went through a program to be a first-time homeowner, right? And that's what hope is. It's that one chance. That's what gives me courage. That one chance that somebody looks at me and says, what you did for me was my one chance. That's what keeps me going. That's what makes me go into overdrive, because there's so many people who are searching for that one chance. And a lot of times they don't want it to come from white people. They want it to come from people who look like them. And so that's the driving force. That's what hope is, right? It's another shameless plug, but that's the driving force. Black people, we get a lot of doors closed in our face. We get a lot of no's, but we need people to keep us encouraged until we get that one yes. And hopefully I'm the one yes in a world full of no's. And so that's what keeps me going. That's why I find the courage to do it.
Ian, thank you for the question, and thank you for your powerful answer, Stachelle. For me, 2 things come to mind when you ask about courage. One is I'm having a flashback to the night of the 24th, which we talked about earlier, in which, there's energy, and police and afterwards considering the realities of what had just happened, I had to come to terms with myself. What if you personally get seriously injured or killed with this? Like, what are you doing here? What are you doing as an individual? What are you doing as a faith leader for and with this congregation? And I quickly came to, and I think that is the spirit of largely of our congregation. We've had conversations about this. You know, there are guns on our property. Sometimes protesters have guns. There was the police invading the property seemed imminent on one of the nights, and things could go very, very wrong, and still could on another night of sanctuary to come. And there's a bottom line commitment to something bigger than one's own personal safety. I was arrested numerous weeks ago during one of the protests. It was a night or two right after the Kenosha shooting. And I just felt so deeply about that I set my white butt down on that bridge and waited to be arrested. And while I was waiting, I've never been arrested in my life, I actually became a little bit tearful quietly because I was afraid. Like, I don't know about this. But the bigger picture is there are a lot of Black people who know all about it. And that's where I find my courage. There's the bigger picture here. And if we're going to make a change, we need to step into it. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. And we're seeing thanks come in through the chat as well. It is inspiring hearing you speak, and I hope and pray that anyone who's heard you today will also be inspired to be the one yes in a world full of no's, as Stachelle so powerfully put it. Any of us can look around and see in our communities places where we can be a voice, we can be a hand, we can be an ear. This isn't just for the Louisville context, it's not just for the US context, it's for all of us. And I think one of the ways that we can be in solidarity, I think there are many ways, including prayers for you in the days to come and the years to come as you develop your ministries, but also by being in solidarity, by building our own communities as well. So thank you both, just from the bottom of my heart and those of us here at Emmanuel College, for taking the time to share your stories with us. Blessings on all of you. Be well, take good care.